The desert sun burned like molten metal, turning the canyon walls into mirrors of fire. Dust swirled around Madeline's bare ankles, coating her skin with a gritty film that stung with every movement. Her wrists were raw and blistered, bound tightly with coarse rope that cut into her flesh with every tiny struggle. The sack over her head smelled of sweat and leather, pressing down on her face and making each shallow breath a labor of agony. "Please." "I can't breathe," she croaked, panic clawing at her throat. Her voice was hoarse, cracking against the dryness of the desert air. I'll do whatever you want. Just let me." Footsteps approached, heavy, deliberate, and measured, echoing off the jagged canyon walls. Every nerve in her body screamed that danger had arrived. She could hear the scrape of leather boots against stone, the faint jingle of beads, and a low hum of an almost melodic whistle carried by the wind. Her stomach churned as her mind spun. Who had captured her? Why here, in this unforgiving wasteland? The sack was yanked away in one swift motion. Blinking against the bright glare of the sun, Madeline froze. Standing before her was a towering figure, a man whose presence was magnetic and terrifying at once. His chest was bare, muscles taut and sun-kissed, veins visible beneath the sweat-slicked skin. Long black hair fell past his broad shoulders, braided with strips of leather and dotted with feathers and beads. His eyes, dark and piercing, seemed to see straight into her soul. Madeline's breath hitched as she tried to take a step back, only to realize she had nowhere to run. But then she noticed something that made her entire body go rigid. Around her neck hung a small, tarnished locket, the delicate chain catching the sunlight. The warrior's expression shifted instantly from fierce intensity to something almost frozen. His hand hovered near his chest as if the sight had dredged up memories long buried. "You?" He breathed, the single word heavy with disbelief. His voice was deep, commanding, yet edged with uncertainty. "Where did you get this?" Madeline's pulse thundered in her ears. She didn't understand what she held or why it caused such a reaction, but fear was rapidly overshadowed by curiosity. "It belonged to my mother," she whispered, her voice trembling. She told me stories about your people, about the scouts who protected travelers in the winter." The warrior's gaze didn't waver, and for a moment, the scorching sun, the roaring wind, and the sheer terror of the desert seemed to vanish. His knuckles whitened around the strap of his dagger as though he were fighting an internal battle. Madeline, sensing a crack in the armor of his stoicism, dared to meet his eyes. The canyon around them was silent except for the faint whistle of wind and the distant cry of a hawk. Madeline's heart thumped erratically, pounding like a drum in the vast emptiness. She tried to read his expression, searching for a clue, any hint that she might be safe or at least understood. Finally he spoke, his voice low and measured, tinged with a gravity that made her chest tighten. "You shouldn't have come here," he said, though his tone lacked the malice she had feared. "And yet, you carry what was thought lost forever." Madeline's knees trembled. She had never faced a situation so frightening, yet so strangely compelling. The man in front of her wasn't just a captor, he was a guardian of something old, something sacred, and now, somehow, she was entangled in it. The desert seemed to hold its breath along with her. The canyon walls, red and jagged, stretched infinitely, holding shadows that danced with the heat. In that moment, Madeline realized that her fate wasn't just in the hands of this warrior, it was tied to a history that neither she nor he could fully control. And as the sun beat down, unforgiving and relentless, the man's piercing eyes never left her face. Whatever this encounter would bring, she knew one thing for certain: the next step she took or didn't take would change everything. The canyon wind whispered through the jagged cliffs, carrying grains of dust that stung Madeline's cheeks. She staggered back a step, the rope still cutting into her wrists, and tried to steady her ragged breathing. Takoda's eyes never left, the small locket glinting in the sunlight against her chest. There was something in the way his jaw tightened, the sudden hardening of his gaze that made her pulse hammer in her ears. "It belonged to my mother," Madeline said again, her voice trembling. "She said it was a gift from someone who helped our family survive the harsh winters decades ago. I didn't think it mattered now." Her words hung in the dry, scorching air like fragile glass. Takoda's hand instinctively reached out, fingers brushing the pendant, but he stopped himself. His eyes, dark and piercing, betrayed a storm of emotions: shock, recognition, and something. Older, annoying guilt. "Where did you get this? After all this time?" he asked, his voice rough like sandpaper but tinged with awe. Madeline swallowed hard, her throat dry. "I found it among my mother's things after she passed. She told me stories of the scouts from your people, of bravery, honor, and trust. I didn't know it was real." The silence stretched between them, broken only by the whispering wind and the distant cry of a hawk circling high above the canyon rim. Takoda's sharp eyes scanned her face, as if searching for some truth hidden in the sweat and dirt, in the fear that radiated from her. Madeline noticed his hand twitch near his knife, as if holding a weapon wasn't instinct, but restraint. "You shouldn't have come here," Takoda finally said, his tone low and measured. "This place, it's dangerous. And yet, you carry what was lost long ago." His gaze softened for a fleeting moment, a vulnerability that startled Madeline. The terrifying warrior before her was not just a protector or a threat. He was a man tethered to the past, and somehow she had become part of it. Madeline took a cautious step forward, her voice steadier now. "I didn't mean to intrude. I swear I didn't. I had nowhere else to go." The words tasted bitter in her mouth, heavy with fear and desperation. "I was fleeing from people who, they would have killed me." Takoda's brow furrowed. He glanced toward the canyon's narrow exit, his eyes flicking to the distant sun-scorched horizon, alert for any threat. "Then you are fortunate. But luck alone will not save you here." He paused, studying her face again, and his expression shifted from vigilance to contemplation. "Your locket. It tells a story I thought ended long ago. Your mother. She had the courage to survive. You." He trailed off as if the right words were buried in memory. Madeline's pulse raced. She could feel the weight of history pressing down on them both, heavier than the desert sun above. She realized that the locket wasn't just jewelry, it was a bridge between two worlds. Hers, a world of settlers and fragile survival, and Takoda's, a world of honor, warriors, and centuries of unspoken stories. "Will you help me?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Please, I have nowhere else to go." For a moment, Takoda said nothing. The wind tugged at his long black hair, braided with feathers and beads, giving him an almost ethereal presence against the jagged canyon walls. Then he slowly nodded, the tension in his shoulders easing ever so slightly. "You will follow me," he said, "and you will do as I say. Your safety depends on it." Madeline nodded, swallowing her fear, and took a tentative step closer. She could see the faint scars along Takoda's forearms, the careful discipline in his stance, and the unmistakable weight of responsibility in his eyes. Somehow, in the sweltering canyon heat, amidst the dust, sweat, and fear, she felt a spark of hope as they moved together along the narrow canyon path. The shadows stretching long under the descending sun, Madeline realized that she was no longer just a frightened woman fleeing from danger. She was a player in a story much larger than herself, a story of courage, survival, and a secret from the past waiting to reveal itself. and in the silence between the canyon walls, with Takoda guiding her, she felt the first flicker of trust, fragile but undeniable, taking root in the heart of the desert. The desert stretched endlessly under the blazing sun, a cruel expanse of rock, sand, and glaring heat. Madeline's wrists still stung from the rough rope, but she barely noticed as adrenaline surged through her veins. From somewhere beyond the canyon walls came the sharp, echoing report of gunfire, followed by the hiss of bullets whistling over rock. Her heart leapt into her throat. "They're here," she gasped. Takoda's dark eyes scanned the horizon, narrowing like a predator's. His muscles tensed, coiled for movement. "Hold on," he said, grabbing her arm with surprising gentleness for a man of such raw strength. "Stay close to me." Before she could protest, he lifted her effortlessly, his grip firm but careful. Dust swirled around them, the canyon echoing. The thunder of distant hooves. Madeline clutched at his broad shoulders, feeling the taut power of his sun-scorched back. The world around them blurred, the red rocks, the swirling sand, the glimmering mirage of the sun on the horizon, as they sprinted across uneven ground. Behind them, the sound of pursuit grew louder. Bandits, cruel and relentless, had tracked her. She could hear their taunts carried by the wind, bitter voices calling her name as if savoring her fear. Each step she took felt perilous. One misstep could send them tumbling down jagged rocks. Takoda moved with uncanny precision, his bare feet finding purchase where no sensible person would dare. "Keep low," he instructed, guiding her behind a jagged outcrop. They crouched, pressed against the sun-baked stone, panting. "They're fast," Madeline whispered, her voice shaking. "We can't outrun them forever." Takoda's gaze hardened. "Then we won't outrun them, we'll outsmart them." His hand swept over the landscape, calculating angles, shadows, and routes only a man born of the desert could see. Every instinct honed by years of survival told him exactly where to lead her. They crested a narrow ridge, the canyon opening into a dry wash littered with jagged boulders. Takoda dropped Madeline carefully behind a large rock and darted out, moving like a shadow among the stone pillars. She held her breath as arrows and bullets thudded into the earth around them, each strike sending clouds of dust into the air. Takoda returned fire with a bow he produced seemingly from nowhere, each shot precise and unerring. Madeline's fear warred with awe. She had fled from humans before, but never had she witnessed such a combination of raw strength, grace, and strategy. He wasn't merely fighting for her. He was moving as though the desert itself guided his steps. A glimmer of hope flickered in her chest when he gestured for her to follow a narrow path along the canyon wall. Every step was a test of balance, her arms trembling from the rope burns, her legs weak from running, but she trusted him. With each bound, she could feel her fear beginning to transform into something sharper, fiercer, a determination she had not known she possessed. Suddenly, a boulder shifted underfoot. Madeline froze. From the shadows, one of the bandits appeared, aiming a rifle straight at her. Takoda's reflexes were instantaneous. He leapt between them, knocking the gun aside and sending the man sprawling onto the jagged rock below. The canyon echoed with the thud of the fall, and the remaining pursuers faltered, uncertainty flashing in their eyes. Madeline's heart raced as Takoda pulled her to her feet. "We're not safe yet," he said, eyes scanning the horizon again. "But we are close." As they pushed onward, the canyon walls narrowing around them like ancient guardians, Madeline realized that this was no longer just a fight for survival, it was a test of trust. She had nowhere else to turn but to him. And somehow, even in the unforgiving heat of the desert, amidst dust, gunfire, and blood, she sensed that Takoda's protection was both a shield and a lifeline. The sun dipped lower, painting the canyon in bruised hues of orange and crimson. Shadows stretched long and menacing, but in that fleeting light, Madeline felt a spark of something new, a fragile, flickering hope that maybe, just maybe, she would survive this desert chase. And as Takoda led her along a hidden path only he could see, she clung to that hope like a lifeline, knowing that every step forward brought them closer to safety, or to an unknown fate lurking just beyond the canyon's edge. The desert sun dipped lower, painting the jagged canyon walls in shades of deep orange and crimson. Madeline's legs shook with exhaustion, her breath coming in ragged gasps as Takoda guided her through the narrow, twisting paths. Every step was precarious, the rocks jagged and sharp, but Takoda moved with the ease of someone who had known these lands all his life. Finally, he stopped abruptly, signaling for her to crouch behind a boulder. Before them lay a hidden alcove, a small oasis tucked away like a secret only the desert knew. Crystal clear water shimmered under the last rays of the sun, framed by slender palm fronds that swayed gently in a cool breeze. The scent of damp earth and fresh water was intoxicating after the dust and heat of the canyon. Madeline's throat tightened, and for the first time in hours, she allowed herself a small, shaky smile. "Is this safe?" she asked, her voice barely audible. Takoda's dark eyes scanned the perimeter, muscles tensing as though he expected danger to leap from the shadows at any moment. "Safe?" "For now," he said, finally lowering her to the ground. He gently helped loosen the ropes around her wrists, and she rubbed the raw skin, wincing. His movements were careful, deliberate, showing a side of him she had not yet seen, gentleness beneath the warrior's exterior. She took a tentative step toward the water, kneeling to drink. The cool liquid slid down her throat, washing away the grit and dryness that had clung to her since the morning. The oasis was small, but in that quiet, secluded space, it felt like a world apart from the harsh desert outside. Takoda sat nearby, his gaze fixed on her, yet distant, as though lost in thought. Madeline noticed the intricate beads and feathers braided into his long black hair, the scars along his arms, and the taut muscles beneath his skin. He was fearsome and commanding, yet there was something quietly vulnerable in the way he observed her. "You should rest," he said finally, his voice low and measured. "You've been running for hours, and the desert will take its toll if you don't regain strength." Madeline hesitated, then nodded, sinking onto the soft sand beside the water. "Why are you helping me?" she asked, curiosity overriding her exhaustion. "You don't even know me. I could be a threat." Takoda's jaw tightened, and he looked away toward the sun dipping below the cliffs. "I know what it is to be hunted," he said, voice rough. "And I know the value of trust. You carry something important. Something that should not be lost to the world." His eyes flicked to the locket resting against her chest. Still catching the sunlight, Madeline traced the pendant absent-mindedly, feeling the weight of its history. "My mother. She always said that objects hold stories," she whispered. "But I didn't know it could mean this much." A silence settled between them, broken only by the gentle rustle of the palms and the distant call of a hawk circling overhead. Night was approaching, and with it came the low, eerie sounds of the desert coyotes howling in the distance, the faint rustle of creatures stirring in the underbrush. Madeline shivered despite the warmth of the day, realizing that even in this hidden paradise, danger was never far away. Takoda's gaze softened as he studied her. "The desert is cruel, but it can also protect," he said quietly. "Here, you are safe for now, but we cannot linger. Tomorrow we will need to move. The world beyond this canyon does not forgive weakness." Madeline's chest rose and fell as she nodded. She understood that this oasis, while a refuge, was only a brief reprieve. She had survived the canyon chase, but the trials ahead were uncertain. Still, For the first time in days, she felt a glimmer of hope fueled by the warrior who had risked everything to save her, whose presence was both terrifying and reassuring. As the sun finally sank behind the canyon walls, casting deep shadows across the water, Madeline allowed herself to close her eyes for a few moments. In the quiet, secluded beauty of the oasis, she realized that survival was no longer just about running. It was about trust, courage, and the fragile alliances that could make the difference between life and death. And for the first time, she felt it, a fragile connection forming between herself and the mysterious, fierce warrior named Takoda, a bond that would carry them through the trials of the desert yet to come. The first light of dawn cast pale gold across the canyon, illuminating a narrow trail that led Madeline and Takoda toward the heart of the Apache village. Madeline's wrists had mostly healed from the rope burns, and the cool morning breeze carried the scent of pine and earth. She followed silently, every step careful, her eyes taking in the unfamiliar surroundings. The village was a cluster of sturdy, low huts, their walls made from sun-baked clay and timber, nestled at the base of the canyon cliffs. Smoke curled from a few chimneys, carrying the rich aroma of cooking fires. Children ran barefoot across the dusty paths, their laughter echoing in the crisp morning air. Women swept and carried water from a small central well. Men moved with purpose, eyes alert, spears and tools in hand. As they entered, the activity in the village paused. Women stopped their work, children froze mid-step, and elders emerged from the shadows of the huts. Whispers spread like wildfire. Eyes followed Madeline's every move. Takoda moved with authority, guiding her forward, his hand subtly hovering near the hilt of his dagger, ensuring she remained protected. "This is Madeline," he announced in a voice that brooked no argument, though tinged with caution. "She is lost, but she is under my protection." The elders exchanged glances, their expressions a mixture of suspicion and curiosity. One stepped forward, an older man with deep lines carved into his face, eyes sharp despite his years. "You bring her here?" he asked, voice low but firm. "Do you know what this means? She carries nothing of your people, yet she bears the mark of our past." Madeline's fingers instinctively touched the locket resting against her chest. She felt the weight of its history, heavier now than ever. I don't mean to cause trouble," she said softly. "I only carry what my mother left me, a memory. I never thought it would matter here." The elder's eyes softened slightly, though a shadow of doubt remained. Takoda nodded once, affirming her words. "Her presence may stir old memories, yes," he said, "but she is not here to harm. She is here because she has nowhere else to go." A few of the women exchanged wary looks, whispering among themselves. Children peeked curiously from behind their mothers, their wide eyes fixed on Madeline. The village, Madeline realized, was a living testament to centuries of survival, honor, and vigilance. Every gaze carried a question. Who was she, really, and why had fate brought her here? One of the elders, a woman with silver-streaked hair and a sharp gaze, stepped forward. "That locket she wears. It belonged to a family that once walked alongside our scouts," she said, her voice trembling slightly with age and emotion. "It is a symbol of peace, trust, and promises made long ago. If it is truly hers, then her coming is no accident." Madeline's heart raced. She had not known the locket's significance beyond her mother's stories, but now she understood. It was more than a keepsake, it was a key, a bridge between two worlds, two cultures, two histories that had intertwined decades before her birth. Takoda's dark eyes softened as he glanced at her. "You see," he said quietly, "even here, in a place you never imagined, the past guides the present. That locket, it saved more than just memory today. It brought you here." Madeline swallowed hard, the weight of responsibility pressing on her. She realized that her role was no longer passive. Her presence could either reignite old tensions or help forge a fragile understanding between the settlers and the Apache tribe. She would need courage, wisdom, and trust, not just in Takoda, but in herself. The village slowly resumed its activities, though glances remained curious and cautious. Madeline felt a strange mix of fear and belonging. The elder's words lingered. In her mind, sometimes survival meant more than running. It required understanding the past, facing the present, and daring to shape the future. As she walked beside Takoda through the village, she felt the first faint flicker of hope. The desert, with all its danger and desolation, had led her to a place of refuge and perhaps a place where her courage and the locket's history could make a difference. And though the path ahead remained uncertain, Madeline knew one thing. Her journey with Takoda and the story she carried around her neck was only beginning. The sun had barely risen, yet the village was already alive with movement. Children laughed and ran along dusty paths, women carried water from the central well, and men sharpened tools and checked their weapons. Madeline followed Takoda through the village, her steps lighter than yesterday, yet her mind was uneasy. Something whispered in the back of her mind, a warning she couldn't place. "They're close," Takoda muttered, his voice low and tense. His dark eyes swept across the horizon, every muscle coiled like a spring. "We must be ready." Madeline glanced at him, fear and curiosity mingling. "Who's close?" she asked. Takoda's jaw tightened. "Bandits. They tracked you to the canyon, and someone from within may have led them here." Madeline froze. Her stomach churned at the thought of betrayal. Someone within the village, trusted by Takoda, siding with the enemy. She swallowed hard, gripping her locket as if it might somehow shield her from what was coming. Suddenly, the sound of distant shouts echoed from the canyon entrance. Takoda tensed, and within moments, arrows whistled over the rooftops. The bandits had arrived, their guns raised, faces twisted with greed and malice. Panic rippled through the villagers. "Get behind the huts." Takoda barked, moving with fluid precision. He pulled Madeline close, shielding her as he darted between buildings, his bare feet silent against the dusty ground. She stumbled to keep up, adrenaline sharp in her veins. From the shadows, a villager emerged, one of Takoda's scouts, smiling in a way that sent a chill down Madeline's spine. Before she could react, he signaled to the bandits, revealing a hidden path into the village. Betrayal. The word rang in her mind like a drumbeat of doom. Takoda's eyes narrowed, fury flashing like lightning. "Traitor," he growled, his voice echoing through the canyon. He launched himself at the scout with lightning speed, knocking him down and pinning him to the ground. The betrayal burned hotter than the desert sun. Madeline watched in disbelief, realizing how fragile trust could be, even in a place that had seemed like sanctuary. The bandits advanced, but Takoda moved with a combination of strategy and raw power that seemed almost superhuman. Each arrow he fired struck true, each movement precise. Madeline, trembling but determined, helped the villagers by guiding children to safety and closing gaps in their defenses. Fear surged within her, but so did courage, a courage she hadn't known she possessed. The battle raged across the village, dust and smoke swirling in the golden morning light. Takoda fought not just for her, but for the people who had welcomed her. His dark eyes met hers briefly, and in that glance she saw an unspoken message. Survive, and you will understand the cost of loyalty and the power of trust. Amidst the chaos, Madeline remembered the locket. It wasn't just a piece of jewelry, it was a symbol, a link between the past and present. Holding it tightly, she found clarity. She guided a group of villagers to higher ground, shouting directions over the clamor of arrows, shouts, and gunfire. Her voice grew steadier with each command, her fear replaced with resolve. Finally, the bandits faltered. Takoda and the villagers had outmaneuvered them, forcing the intruders back toward the canyon's edge. The traitorous scout was bound, his eyes wide with fear and shame. The village was battered but standing. Dust coated every surface, and the air was thick with tension and the acrid scent of spent gunpowder. Takoda lowered his bow, sweat glistening on his sun-kissed skin, braided, hair plastered to his shoulders. He turned to Madeline, expression hard but proud. "You did well," he said, voice low, almost private. "Courage is not just about fighting, it is knowing when to act and when to guide others through fear." Madeline exhaled, relief and exhaustion mingling. Her heart still raced, but she understood something essential. Survival meant trust, bravery, and the ability to see past immediate danger to the bigger picture. And Takoda, fierce and protective, had shown her that even in betrayal, there was a way to fight and endure. As the villagers began tending to the wounded and repairing damage, Madeline knew that this moment, the chaos, the danger, the betrayal, had changed her forever. She had become part of the story, no longer merely a survivor, but an active participant in the harsh, beautiful, and dangerous world of the desert. And as Takoda stood beside her, muscles tense and eyes scanning the horizon, she realized that whatever came next, she would face it by his side. The canyon was silent now. The echoes of gunfire and shouts faded into the distance. Dust settled over the village, coating huts, tools, and the weary bodies of the villagers who had fought alongside Takoda. Madeline's chest heaved as she knelt beside the clear water of the oasis, wiping sweat and dust from her face. The morning sun cast long shadows, painting the canyon in hues of gold and amber. Takoda stood nearby, vigilant as ever, his dark eyes scanning the horizon. Muscles taut and glistening under the sun, his bare chest and braided hair made him a striking figure of both power and protection. He adjusted the dagger at his waist, the tribal beads and leather straps glinting with the first light of day. For a moment, he allowed himself a rare exhale. Knowing the immediate danger had passed, Madeline approached him cautiously, holding the small locket against her chest. "The bandits. They won't come back," she said, voice tentative. "Not after today." Takoda shook his head, sharp and precise. "The desert never forgives," he said. "There will always be threats, always those who seek to take what is not theirs." He studied her face, softening slightly. "But you survived. You did not falter. You are stronger than you know." Madeline felt a strange warmth at his words, a bond forming that went beyond fear and survival. "I couldn't have done it without you," she admitted. "Without your guidance, your protection, I wouldn't even be here." Takoda's eyes darkened, a flicker of vulnerability breaking through his fierce exterior. "You carry the past in that locket," he said, gesturing toward it. "It has guided you here, just as it guided your mother. History is not merely stories, it is strength, inheritance, and responsibility. You must understand its weight." Madeline nodded, feeling the enormity of the moment. The locket had been more than a memory. It was a key to trust, courage, and survival. She realized that the danger she had faced was not merely physical, it had been a test of character, endurance, and moral courage. And through it all, Takoda had been both a shield and a guide. A soft rustle came from the canyon mouth, and both of them tensed. Takoda raised a hand, signaling caution. From the shadows emerged villagers, elders, and children, gathering slowly. The elders approached, the silver-haired woman who had first recognized the locket leading them. "You have done well," she said to Madeline, her voice both approving and gentle. "You have honored your mother's legacy by surviving, by showing courage, and by trusting those who protect you. You are part of our story now." Madeline's eyes filled with tears, a mixture of relief, pride, and recognition. She understood now that survival had never been enough. Courage was about connecting, learning, and facing danger with a heart willing to endure. Takoda's gaze softened as he watched her, a faint smile touching the corner of his lips. "The desert tests everyone," he said quietly. "It takes. It challenges, it punishes. But it also rewards those who are brave and wise. Today you have passed." For a moment they stood together, two figures silhouetted against the canyon walls. Dust swirled in the morning light, casting dramatic shadows. Madeline felt the pulse of the desert, the rhythm of survival, and the weight of the locket around her neck. She had begun as a frightened woman, captured and alone, and now she stood strong, tested, and recognized Dot as the villagers returned to their daily tasks. Takoda extended a hand to her. "Come," he said. "There is more to learn, more to survive, and more to honor. But for now, we rest." Madeline took his hand, her fingers brushing his calloused ones, and allowed herself a small, steadying breath. The desert was vast, dangerous, and unpredictable, but she was no longer alone. She had Takoda by her side, courage in her heart, and the legacy of the past guiding her forward. Dot as the sun climbed higher, casting the canyon in blazing light. Madeline and Takoda stood together, ready to face whatever trials the desert and the world might throw at them next. The journey had changed them both, binding them in a shared story of survival, trust, and unspoken understanding. Dot, and somewhere deep in the canyon, the wind whispered through the rocks, carrying their story forward into the vast, unforgiving desert.